Hello, welcome to the OK Preps Extra Podcast. I'm Patrick Prince, joined as always by Barry Lewis. And it's Tuesday, January 17th, the day after Martin Luther King Day. So we're all back in the office. I say we all, Barry, I'm sure you worked on the holiday as you work on most holidays. So I'll just say back in the office for me, and for you, you're still in the office. So I thought we'd do something fun today, Barry. You and I talked about this a little bit last week. We're in the process of selecting the all-world candidates. Of course, we'll have our all-world banquet in the summer where we will announce some winners. But right now, you're in the process of compiling this year's candidates. But let's take a second and let's talk about the best football players you've covered in your career. You've been a member of the media since about the mid-'80s. Let's talk about some of the best football players that you've seen. And let's just kind of share with readers some of that stuff.
All right. We're going to name a top 10 Oklahoma prep players that I've seen during that time. And for purposes of this discussion, we're going to limit those players to ones that I've actually covered and seen during my time as a media member, and not just someone I've seen on TV or seen film of, or before I became a media member. So if you wonder why such and such a person isn't on my list, it might be because I never actually got to cover them in a game in person, which is the case with Rocky Calmus, with Jenks, because there was a period of time, a small period of time in starting around the mid-'90s for almost a decade where high school was not a primary focus for me because I was on other beats. But I did do some high school coverage in that time, and one of the people on my list will be from that time because I got to cover him in a secondary role that I had on high schools back then. So you want to and we're also not going to have anyone who participated from this past season, so it's not to tip off or give away anyone our all-world awards. So from the 2022 season, like an Emmanuel Crawford or Eric McCarty, they're not eligible for purposes of this discussion, or anyone else. We had so many great players this year. So
yeah, it was a good year. And also too, this is not a top 10 list. It's just 10 players. So we're
10
not
players. Yes.
You're not ranking 10 through 1. These are just 10 collective.
10 collective. And I think the list tends to be, without being accused of being a homer, it's going to be dominated by players from the Tulsa area, because those are players I think naturally I would tend to pick Tulsa players for a couple of reasons. One is that the Tulsa area, especially in the large classes, is totally dominated most of my time as a media member. And two, there have been impressive performances that I've actually seen are important too, because a lot of the hyped players and really good players from other parts of the state, especially in the larger classes, some of them did not fare so well in games that I covered when they were going against teams from this area. So with those are the parameters, here we go. I'll dive in with a player from the West Side to start us off with. 1989 State Player of the Year, Cale Gundy from Midwest City. He was I've got 3 or 4 quarterbacks on the list, 4 quarterbacks, I guess you'd say, and 2 of them are guys I'd say are pure quarterbacks, known for being quarterbacks. And Cale Gundy is certainly, he's one of the best I've seen, which is why he's on this top 10 list. He's an incredible player. And my other pure quarterback from this list, and of course, Cale Gundy, he and his brother Mike are the only players to win each brother combination before the Presleys to win the State Player of the Year award. So, and the other pure quarterback on my list, who also started his career out on the West Side before coming east to Owasso, is Paul Smith, who obviously went on to have a great career at the University of Tulsa and played a little bit in the NFL. The 2 other quarterbacks on the list, but they also play defense, are Sean Jackson from McLean. And he put up some incredible offensive numbers and defensive numbers. I mean, just off the charts numbers on both sides of the ball. And of course, he went on to a outstanding career at TU and was Conference Defensive Player of the Year, led them to the famous win at Notre Dame.
Mhm.
And also Malcolm Rodriguez, who had a pretty good season this year as a rookie in the NFL with
Sure.
the Detroit Lions. But he was what he did as a quarterback was incredible. Also outstanding on the defensive side of the ball, as you could. That's probably no surprise after seeing him with the Lions and at OSU. So he could do it all. So those are 4 of the top 10 on the list. And then another McLean player who's had a great year in the NFL. Speaking of that, Josh Jacobs picked to the Pro Bowl this year. Incredible season with the Raiders. And McLean, I guess you could say he was really what I'd classify as a running back, although his senior year, he was actually their quarterback, but he's really a running back playing quarterback the way their offense was designed. And he was also could play in the secondary as well. So that's half the list.
Now hold on, Barry, before we get too far. So Sean Jackson's a little bit like Josh too, in a way, isn't he? I mean, you're picking him not necessarily for his quarterback skills, but more so his all-around skills. Is that fair?
Oh, well, Sean was just amazing on both sides of the ball. I mean, I think he wound up with over an incredible number of tackles, but you also look at his total yards list. I mean, it's off the charts too. I mean, the combination of stats he put on both sides of the ball are just eye-popping. So whereas Josh, I don't know if he necessarily had the great defensive stats. He was a really good defensive player, but his big numbers were on the offensive side of the ball.
Did Sean play in the NFL any?
He did not. He never really got much of a chance. He got, I think, a brief tryout camp look, but he really never got that chance, which was really disappointing. So, he had a great career at TU.
Now, isn't he still in the Tulsa area doing something?
He still is in the Tulsa area, yes.
Is he a police officer, maybe?
Well, I think, well, he's been working with kids, at least the last I heard. He's been working with kids, and I also think he was wanting to get into officiating.
Oh, well, they need officials, right?
Yes. The Officials Association needs officials, and I think he would be a great one. So,
yeah. No doubt about it. All right, continue with the list.
All right. Well, one that should be a no-brainer is because he's the only 2-time state player of the year, at least in the last 30 years, is Bixby's and now TU's Braylon Presley. And it was hard to pick Braylon over Brennan, his brother. But I'm going to go with Braylon since he is a 2-time award winner, state player of the year. He's got to be an automatic. So in
terms of just skill, Barry, why do you give Braylon the edge?
Just because I'm giving Braylon the edge over Brennan, because Braylon is a 2-time state player of the year. I've got to put this 2-time winner on.
Okay.
But yeah, otherwise they're even. I mean, and Brennan was a really good player on the defensive side of the ball. So you could make an argument that Brennan should be on this list over Braylon, but it's like, I really got to have the 2-time winner, 2-time state player of the year on the list. So Brennan's going to be on my honorable mention list, just barely missed the cut list that we'll go over when I'm through with the top 10. But as far as moving on, also from Bixby, Chris Harris, former NFL Pro Bowler. He was an incredible player, both sides of the ball for Bixby. Really was part of the era that really laid the foundation for the success that Bixby's had over the past decade, because before Chris Harris got there for Coach Pat McGrew, that they were always a decent team, but they could never really get past the quarterfinals. And he helped lay the foundation he was a part of the start of the era where they got the 3 state title games in 5 years. So that just leaves a few spots left. The next one, former NFL first-round draft choice, Felix Jones, Booker T. Washington running back, such a dynamic player, state player of the year in 2004. And then wound up playing for the Dallas Cowboys. I guess with most of these offensive players, one thing they have in common, every time they touch the ball, you think they're a threat to score, at least of the running backs on the list. So Felix, just an amazing talent and had a great career. And then that leads us to Dylan Stoner from Jenks, wide receiver, defensive back. I remember Coach Alan Trimble said that he compared what Dylan's impact on both sides of the ball to Rocky Kalmus. Enough said. So Dylan Stoner is on the list. In the last selection on the list, got to pick a lineman. And the most dominant offensive lineman that I've seen during his high school career was Andrew Rame from Broken Arrow.
Okay, I was gonna try to stop you, Barry, and see if I could get
sorry about that.
No, that's I could have jumped in. I just was gonna just let you say it, but I wondered if you were gonna say Andrew Rame. Okay.
Of course, a really nice college career too.
For sure.
Yeah.
Now, okay, let's talk about that for a second. If not him, who would have been the other lineman? Let's say, we only have, you mentioned the one lineman, but if there'd have been another, who would it have been?
Well, I was tempted to put, because I've only had one lineman ever as a player of the year, and it was Jake Alexander from Jenks.
Of course.
2009.
Yep.
So who learned from, and there's a common denominator here because Jake's dad, David, was also Andrew's head coach at Broken Arrow. So it's a David Alexander connection.
Okay, so we've talked often, Barry, about your freakish memory, and it really is uncanny, the memory you have. I mean, it's pretty crazy. When we talked about this last week, you were going to kind of spend the week thinking about it. Was this a hard list to come up with, or did the names start to kind of jump out pretty quick?
Oh, the names. I mean, it's like it was trying to limit the number of names because there's so many names that jumped out so quickly. So it was hard to cut it down. And I want to also say like 6 honorable mentions who were really, I mean, I could say there's like 80 honorable mentions, but I'm going to go with just these 6 who were just like really so close when I made the final list. Nakia Jones from Wagner, who wound up not playing college football, but wow, he was just big play after big play, and in the Malcolm Rodriguez era. And then Kevin Peterson, also from Wagner, player of the year in 2011, and also played in the NFL. Then, of course, said Brendan Presley. Then 2 guys from Union, Dom Franks, who played in the NFL and for OU, and Jeremy Smith, running back. He's such a big dick game running back. And Edison Savion Morrison.
Yep.
And also considered Wes Caswell from Edison from the 90s. So again, could go on and on and on, but those were the guys that just barely missed the cut. And, as far as we limited for this discussion state players, but one of the greatest players I've seen play in a high school game in the state was from the state of Arkansas. I remember his name was Mackenzie Phillips. His dad was the Outland Trophy winner for the University of Arkansas. And I remember seeing him play at Metro Christian. This was in the mid 80s. And the reason his name has been in the news lately was when the incident with Hamlin occurred with the Buffalo Bills going into cardiac arrest on the field. Well, what was really weird, Mackenzie Phillips was really hyped player, and he lived up to that hype that night. I saw him at Metro Christian. And I believe Mackenzie was playing for Springdale. And a few weeks after that, he nearly died on the field. He went into cardiac arrest on the field. So, but he made an amazing recovery, and he wound up playing for the University of Arkansas, having a really solid career there. And so his name had come back into my memory. And I've also seen online, there's been like some in the Arkansas area, there's been some "Where Are They Now" features about him remembering when he almost died on the field and comparing him to the Hamlin situation. But as far as like an out-of-state player, seeing him play here, he was pretty incredible.
Yeah, but well, great list of names. Nobody from the 80s on your list.
Cale Gundy.
I thought he was early 90s.
He's 1989.
That's right. You said that. You said 1989.
I wanted to throw in Mackenzie Phillips since he was from 86, but so Cale Gundy would be the one who goes furthest back in 1989. But I could have thrown in Dan Bitson.
Of course.
He would, I guess if I would extend this list to the top 20, I would have put Dan Bitson, who was been an 85, would have been his senior season at Booker T. I would have put him on the list. And so I guess had to cut it off somewhere. Glenn Bell from Muskogee, he was another 80s player. I considered him. So it could go on and on.
Yeah, you gotta cut it off at some point, right? Like this, well, so is it fun for you to do stuff like this, or is it hard because you fret about the people that don't make the list?
Both. It is fun, but I also fret. I mean, I think it's really good no matter what the sport, or whether it's pro, college, high schools. I really like doing lists like this, but I also do fret about who I do not include the list, because there's so many great players that I've seen through the years. And again, some of the people who are not on my list, I did not actually get to see. They're not on the list only because I didn't get to see them play or as a member of the media. So
yeah, throw a couple of those out there.
David Collins, I did not get to see him play in person on football. I saw him in basketball. But and for those who didn't see it, there was a really cool Hard Knocks on HBO last week, because they've been doing the Arizona Cardinals, and he was one of the primary people on there. So a lot of his hominy and TU background were talked about on there. So that was really neat. So those are the top 10 and honorable best of the rest.
Well, that's a good list. And that was kind of a fun exercise, Barry. Thanks for, as if you don't have enough things on your plate already. Thanks for indulging us with one more little project for your week. Well, let's talk about this year's All World for a second. We mentioned it last week. The All World process is ongoing. What would you like to share about that?
Yes. The All World teams and All State football will be released starting February 11th. That's when the All World football is going to be announced, and followed by All State football the next day on the 12th, Super Bowl Sunday. And then we'll have the rest of the All World fall sports teams in the 3 days following that. And also remember to send in your nominations for Players of the Week to me for the winter sports, basketball, wrestling, and swimming. So we welcome those.
Yeah, absolutely. The Bill Knight Athletes of the Week for winter. We've been doing those a couple of weeks. So yeah, send in your nominations. And Barry, I think when I read this last week, I shouted at you across the office what Tyler Rich from Owasso, the wrestler of the week last week, what he did. I just was so impressed, and what a week for him. And anyway, these player of the weeks are, sometimes you read these performances that are just, really incredible, and reading what Tyler did last week was pretty impressive.
Yeah, he was pinning everybody in 15 seconds, it seemed like. And he had a really good football season, too. I'd say there's a pretty good chance you might see him on the all-world football list.
Oh, all right. All right, Barry. Well, we could probably end it there unless there's something else on your mind.
Well, just a lot of big basketball tournaments coming up this week. This is the last tournament week for the regular season. And it's hard to believe, but ranking it's getting close to when the rankings are closed off as far as determining playoff seedings in basketball. So this is a big week for a lot of teams.
And you've said previously you think that's too early to cut the rankings off, right?
Way too early. I mean, they're still the OSSA in this regards. And again, as we talked about last week, I think the OSSA has a thankless job. And while I don't agree with everything they do, I think they also deserve a lot of credit. But I think they're just stuck in the 80s. Some people say they're stuck in the 80s as far as the shot clock is concerned. But as far as doing how they do the playoffs, I think they're stuck in the 80s. So playoff rankings are cut off way too early.
Yeah, we're in mid-January. It just seems awful.
I mean, for the smaller classes, it's about cutoff time, and then the last rankings that are used for the larger classes are the ones that come out on February 6th. Way too early. I mean, there's a lot of big games played after that have no bearing, as it turns out, on playoff seedings. That just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Barry, appreciate the knowledge as always. Appreciate everybody checking us out. You can listen to us for free on Apple, Google, or Spotify. Barry and I come at you once a week, usually Monday or Tuesday. Usually we have to push it, or sometimes we have to push it to Tuesday because of me. Barry's far better at scheduling than I am. So, but Monday or Tuesday. Barry, thanks a lot. We'll talk next week.
All right. See you next week.